Let's see. There we go. Hey, folks, if you could tell me if the mic is working okay. That would help me out a lot. Hello, Peter. How you doing? Excellent. Good to know. Hey, Epithet, Motion VFX. How y'all doing? Gotta get my notes. I was having a really weird day. So I was actually slightly late, which I'm usually very punctual. Felt weird being a few minutes late, so I apologize. Haven't even had enough time to eat lunch today, so I will be eating these. Shut up and sit down. Commence disco style booty groove. Oh, thanks, Emotion VFX. Thanks a lot for that. I very much appreciate it. No, I had part of the day where I didn't have a whole lot going on. And then when I usually eat, I had a bunch of stupid things happen, which is really annoying. I want to move the camera there, so it's more centered with my screen. It was just a weird day. Like, I'm supposed to get a barbecue, and the people at Lowe's are being idiots. Total idiots. Like, we're supposed to have it delivered yesterday. It was supposed to be already there because we were going to barbecue this week. And they are just not responding to us and telling my wife that she's speaking too quickly. Never had that happen before. And she's been calm. Like, I've been listening to her when she does the calls, because usually I handle those kinds of things to make sure that they listen. Because I don't give in to their demands. They're supposed to call us back to tell us when they were going to figure everything out, and they didn't call us back today. So it's just wonderful. And some other issues with some other things I've had to deal with today, which is completely outside the realm of what I normally talk about for these things. Let's see. I'm gonna open my notes. What's the last thing? Time zone. I'm in the central time zone. So Yeah, it's kind of, I still have all my computers and everything set to the West Coast, because that's the um, company I work with. They're all set to West Coast time. So to make sure that everything is synced up with what they're doing, I leave all my computers set to West Coast. So it's a little disorienting, but it works, I guess, for me. So I got a really good show set up for this evening. Got a lot to talk about. Maybe too many things, so I'm hoping that I have enough time. We're going to be talking about Joel Schumacher, the Sigma FP, and Blackmagic raw encoding that they are now have enabled, and ProRes raw encoding. I'm going to talk about those things. Camera manufacturer color science and when it matters. Cinema v non-cinema lenses. Basically, like some information about what they do, what kind of use they have, and whether or not they probably are going to work for you. Short answer is probably not. You probably don't need to buy cinema lenses. Maybe rent, but probably not buy. Confronting cognitive bias and post-purchase rationalization, which is a pretty big thing. It's usually what leads to a lot of issues when people are talking about camera reviews or lens reviews or whatever. Usually the problem is people trying to rationalize things when it's really just they have biases and that's all. And then the merits of university and school versus independent learning. And I'm bringing that up for a very specific reason. So that'll be the last thing I talk about because it might take some time to explain. So I don't want to take up the entire stream with it. Just a shorthand of it. I don't care how you learn your stuff, to be honest, just that you learn. And the kinds of things that my channel does, like I don't create on my channel, at least currently, a full curriculum. To do the curriculums correctly, it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of brain power, and a lot of manual labor to get that kind of thing to where it's actually going to work properly for most people. So, I have no problem with people independently learning skills or trades or anything, really. But what I don't like is biases for or against these different learning methods, because schools definitely can teach you a ton of things, regardless of what people who are selling their own educational programs will tell you. So I'll just talk about that a bit later on and kind of take an argument that was made in a really stupid and incorrect meme and break it down and how wrong it is so that you can understand what I'm trying to say. So that's that. I don't like memes in general because usually people in memes try to simplify something in a way that doesn't actually work. Like there are usually just lapses in logic that, or it's just factually untrue, and they have an agenda and are trying to play to a base. So that's probably my major issue. Yeah, epithet music. That's what I'm going to be talking about specifically, is the Gerald Undone thing, because that is, I've seen it happen like time and time and time again. And he actually stood up and said, look, here's your guys' problems. The things I'm talking about are real, and you don't want to admit that these are real things because you have biases. And he's totally accurate. Gerald Undone actually does very good reviews, and he does very thorough reviews and analyses of gear, whether or not he's paid to do them. A lot of the things that he does with his reviews is very similar to how I've heard, and this is people who used to work for them, the people who would test Sony gear. This would be specifically the PlayStation and games that would be released on PlayStation. You would do things that no rational human being would ever do with a gaming device, and you unplug and plug in random things just in case someone did it. Does the game blow up? What happens when you do these things to make sure that you know the full capability of the game, or you know the full capability of what's going on? The last thing you want is something where someone saves a game and they press a button in this particular sequence on accident and all the data is erased from their entire console, and those kinds of things could totally happen if you didn't test it. And for gear, you should be testing those kinds of things. And the fact that Gerald Undone does those kinds of tests is actually really helpful for people. And he should not be raked through the mud just because he found issues. Cheap ass reviews. Thanks, man, for the $2. That really helps us. That helps us collectively as far as a channel. Get more content to you and get it in higher quality. So that really helps out. It says, thanks for recommendations for how to shoot at the dentist office last week. The extension cord alone was 10 out of 10. Yeah, man. Always bring some extras and stuff like that. Extra batteries, extra extension cords. Like if you don't have any of those in your bag or your box or whatever it is that you bring, like that's a definite thing that you need to have. Pascal, what do you think of ProRes RAW? I don't get if you can change ISO. It kind of loses the point of RAW. Well, I'll get into that. I'll get into that later. Okay, so stick around. I'll get into that. So hey DJ, I have something for you. This is cool. I got this from Emotion VFX. I'm assuming I can share this because it's unlisted. I'll ask him. Emotion VFX is in here. I would like to share the video that you sent me because DJ loves birds. Can I share it? Okay, cool. Thanks, man. I will share this. And I am very jealous of your bird catching skills because I am quite terrible at getting video of birds. I am quite terrible at it. It's very, very difficult. Do you like kind of leave your camera out and like have it set waiting for the birds to appear and then you just rush over and hit record, or how do you get that kind of footage? Because man, I was out for I think 3 hours one time trying to get birds and I maybe got 10 shots. And out of those 10, maybe a couple were usable. I had to go like on 2 days to get enough for one short video just for fun. So I'd love to know how to do that. And also how to get them to come to your house, because I don't know if any magpies are in my area, but we have tons of cardinals, starlings, and robins that appear. Yeah, DJ, check out the video I sent. It has a bird in it. You'll love it. Let's see here. It's just sitting on the sofa with wireless record button via phone, camera on the tripod. Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Are you doing that with the Pocket 4K? If you're doing that with the Pocket 4K, tell me how you did that. Is it with just one of the remote apps? Because I have one. I just don't usually use it for the recording, but that's a really good idea. Oh, that's cool. Okay. See, I'm like not that creative on being able to get shots like that. So just so I know, like now I understand how you can do that. And that way you probably don't scare away the bird, right? That makes sense. That totally makes sense. That totally makes sense now. Okay. It's 4K app from the store, just tripod. Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, man. That helps a lot. So if you're new to the stream, usually how these run is the first part, I will do some, channel updates and just kind of BS around with a couple things before we get into the meat and potatoes of what these usually are. Which is a Q&A and also just kind of talking about stuff that's usually video production or photo production related. So the first thing I'm going to talk about, if you don't know, I think I said it last week that every week I try to attend a movie night that we have. And right now, like I used to host them at my house when I lived in San Diego, but since moving out from California, now I'm attending them, especially with COVID. Now I'm attending them through streaming. And last night, or not last night, last weekend, we watched 3 animated films. It was Sir Billy, which has Sean Connery in it, amazingly. It's a very poorly done 3D animated film by a small independent Scottish, I believe it's Scottish animation company. And Sean Connery's in it, and it's an experience. It's kind of like one of those things that's like the whole time you're going, WTF, like what the F is going on? Because there are storytelling choices made that don't make a whole lot of sense, especially if it's children that would be watching it. Because there's scenes of danger, like drowning and death. There's one where, like, the characters are talking about how one of these little creatures possibly is paralyzed. And it's really sad. Like, the way that it's done is just terrifying. Like, if I was a kid and I liked those characters, I would be terrified at what I was seeing. And it kind of made me think about, and this is kind of unfair, but it made me think about Don Bluth films. And with his cartoons, he would have adult themes. He'd have things that were very, very mature. Like All Dogs Go to Heaven. If you haven't seen that since a child, watch it as an adult. It's a different experience. But he had a way of doing those cartoons that were a little bit more elegant and whimsical in the subject matter, that didn't make you feel like it was just dour and depressing. So I just thought it was really interesting. I would say Sir Billy is. I was incredulous. I could not believe what I was seeing some of the times. It was pretty amazing. Then we watched Legend of Oz. I really don't like that film, but it was almost good compared to Sir Billy, which was weird because it was competently animated and it looked okay. The problem with that, and if you ever see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. The color palette is totally wrong for the real world, because it's a Wizard of Oz story. And if you've seen the original, which if you're anybody who's involved in learning film at all, you need to see the original Wizard of Oz, even if you don't really particularly like the subject matter or whatever. You should see it for historical reasons. And it's not so much that the color palette's wrong and that they don't do black and white and then color and then black and white. It's wrong because of the context of the story. If you're interested in color grading and how colors and your palette represents the story being told, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about in the beginning. It's too bright, it's too cheerful looking, and there's no real difference between the real world, the way that the real world looks, and the Land of Oz. And when you're doing a story where a character is going from one place to another, you need to have some kind of clear distinction between the two. Even in something like The Last Starfighter, which is a wonderful film, by the way. If you've never seen it, it's one of my favorite films ever made. When the main character goes from Earth to elsewhere, when he goes to this other planet, it looks totally different, and it really makes you feel like he's in another world. Okay, so if you're a filmmaker, you need to use colors and exposure and all of the tools that you have to make the story actually be portrayed correctly. And then the music is wrong. The first song in it is just wrong. You'll know what I mean if you ever see this, which I don't recommend. And then last we saw a movie called Norm of the North, and I hate that movie because it's so lazy. The story writing, to be specific, it's like they'll write stuff in it and then they'll just have a dance number happen for no reason, and it's really frustrating. And they didn't even write original music. Wait, I think there might be a couple of them, but most of them, the bigger numbers, is stuff that already existed, so it's not good. And I think that the takeaway from that session was that I find it really annoying that when there's animated films, I find it in animated films a lot and certain horror movies, where there's not enough effort being put into the screenplay. Because like sometimes I get told I'm being too critical for independent movie houses because they don't have money. And I'm like, the things I'm talking about are not really money related issues. Okay. Choosing a color palette is not money related, especially in an animated film. You could do whatever colors you want. The writing of the script is not a money issue. It's either a talent or a skill issue. Okay. Like, and those are different things. But you know, if you don't have training on how to write a proper script, you know, you could be paid $0 and write an amazing script. You know, you don't have to usually pay for that. If you're like the producer and the director and you wrote your own script, you're getting all that money, right? So it's not like you have to pay a whole lot of extra just to get a decent script. It just has to be a good one. If you compare Pixar films to a ton of other animated film companies, the thing is that people like, I think his name is Pete Docter, his movies always have a core heart to the films. It's not, it never feels like there is an ulterior motive of just like, oh, we're just going to make this movie to make money off of kids because they don't really know what's going on anyway. And I get that feeling from watching some of these other films like Norm of the North, for example. It's just so lazy in the way that it's written. But, you know, you look at Pixar films and they write it in a very specific way to make sure that it's not only enjoyable, but it also makes sense. And you have these really good components of storytelling that other animation companies just don't do. You know, in what was it? What's the one with the robot? WALL-E. Like in WALL-E, the first section of the film, there's like no characters are really uttering any words. If I remember correctly, in the first maybe 10 minutes or so, it's like names between robots, really. And then there's a song from, I want to say Hello Dolly. I think it's from Hello Dolly. But I know it's Michael Crawford singing it. So so it's like, you know, if you want to do better in animated films, you really have to do better in writing. That's like the main thing, I think, from Pixar. So that you can learn from Pixar and Don Bluth as well. I mean, those are like 2D animated films, but it's very, very important that it doesn't really matter which kind of film you do. You have to put effort into stuff like the script and the overall feel that you're trying to go for, like the overall feeling of the story. And that was really what I noticed. Let's see here. What was the other thing? Oh yeah, I finished watching the Back to the Future series. Really, really good series. Still great. Loved it. Man, the third one is still better than I remembered it. It's great. The first and third ones are still awesome. The second one's a little weird because there's some weird internal inconsistencies and issues with it that kind of bug me. Mainly it's around Biff and when he returns the car and he's all like acting like he has a really bad stomach ache. And unless you see the cut scenes from that movie, you don't really know what was going on. And basically they screwed up in the writing, I think, is why they cut it. Because there's things that just don't make sense. But really great. If you haven't seen Back to the Future in a while, I think it might still be on Netflix. Totally check it out. And last week, somebody had mentioned Dark. And I thought that Dark was this, I think it was a Norwegian show that looked similar, but like my wife and I didn't like that there were like space bugs or something at some point, and that's not Dark. Like as far as my recollection, like I started watching Dark again because I couldn't remember what it was. And I was like, okay, we watched the first season, but why did we stop? And I think it's because we watched Dark when it first came out, and I just completely forgot what it was. So I'm rewatching the first season before I get through it. It looks really good. It looks really, really good. For Back to the Future 2, they cut it because the cane wouldn't have been there logically either if he disappeared. So yeah, contradiction in the writing. Yeah, that was a problem. And then, you know, also some issues with like, how is Marty there? How is Doc Brown there? Like, why didn't they disappear? Like there's just some issues in that one as far as the writing. And I think it's kind of like a weird thing because like as a kid, the second one was my favorite one. And I think most kids, probably the second or third ones are their favorite. But as an adult, the first and third ones are definitely on the top. And the second one has more of the, I think, the flashy stuff, which I think as a kid I liked better. And the hoverboards, especially. Like the hoverboard stuff is awesome. Great storytelling device, the hoverboards are. Yeah. Second most fun. Yeah, I could see that. I think that in the second one, my favorite part of it is Griff, the grandson of Biff. He is nuts, and every line he says is hilarious. Every line he says is hilarious. Let's see here. I'm going to go back through, just do a quick view to see if there's any questions before I get into the meat and potatoes. No. Okay. Okay. I'll go to notes. Okay, so the first thing, kind of sad, and I didn't talk about it last week because I just don't think I knew, but Joel Schumacher is he's gone, and I was really sad to hear that. He was a great director, and even one of my favorite shows, home movies, made fun of him for Batman and Robin in one of their episodes. And the thing is, like, Joel Schumacher did a lot of really good work that other people don't really think about, because they think about Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, and that they're kind of, like, in my opinion, they're kind of critical failures. I think they're not very good films, and they're the kind of movies that I'd watch on a bad movie night, especially Batman and Robin. It's not good. But he did other really great films. And if you're not familiar with his body of work, I strongly suggest going through and looking at some of the other things that he did. A few of them that I like, and there's some really good filmmaking in it. And he has, like, everyone's got their own top 10 of any director, but the ones I really like, Falling Down is a really good film. Phantom of the Opera, but I'm very biased because I love Phantom of the Opera and not everyone does. But in that, it has Gerard Butler. If you didn't know, Gerard Butler sings in that. He's the Phantom, if I remember correctly. So totally worth it. And I really like the way he was able to distinguish between the different periods of the film. And then also, I remember my grandparents, who loved Phantom of the Opera, loving the film. And especially the way that they did the lifting of the chandelier to start the movie. I think it started really, really well. I think there's some other things that are not so good. There's some weird cuts in there, and some other questionable choices that I wouldn't have done, but I still like it. But I'm biased, and I admit that. But my favorite of his movies is actually The Lost Boys. I love that film. It's one of my favorite vampire films. I don't like most vampire films. I think they mostly are terrible. But Lost Boys is awesome. And I would strongly recommend, if you haven't seen that one, definitely watch it. It's really good. It's got Kiefer Sutherland in it. So yeah, Flatliners. Flatliners is another one. My mom really liked that movie. I remember seeing it several times. It wasn't like, I can't say that I liked it tremendously. I remember liking it, but it wasn't in my top ones. No, I do not like Blade 2. The first one I don't mind. Blade 1, there's some, I mean, it's been a really long time since I've seen Blade 1. Maybe I'll give it a watch. But I remember in that one, there were these, Blade 1 had it where they shoot these things at the vampires, and they turn into, like, raspberry faces, and their heads blow up. It's freaking crazy. The CG probably looks terrible now. But I remember that being pretty cool. And then there was, like, a really cool scene that I recall in a nightclub. And then I really like the visuals near the end. The visuals near the end were awesome. But I Blade 2, no. I remember that one distinctly, and I'm not a huge fan of Blade 2. But yeah, I was really bummed when I saw that Joel Schumacher died. And unfortunately, it's another one of those things where like sometimes people get remembered more for the bad things they do for no reason when they have so many other really great things as artists. And he did a lot of really great stuff. He also directed some episodes of House of Cards. Good director, very good director, very, very good director. Okay, so we'll move on. So there's the Sigma FP, and that is like, if I remember correctly, it's about $1,700, and it's a full frame 35 millimeter camera, and they released it with the idea of, I think, video makers in mind, because they had like an 8-bit RAW, if I remember correctly. It was an 8-bit, 10-bit, and a 12-bit Cinema DNG RAW. The thing was, like, I saw the results and I was not very impressed. And first of all, I don't like Cinema DNG, so I'm already biased against Cinema DNG because I just don't like working with it. And then the second thing was the image quality did not look much better to me than a ton of different cameras. And the kind of things you'd have to work around to work with the Sigma FP was, there would be more workarounds for me than working with like the Pocket 4K or a GH5 and a number of other cameras. So it just didn't seem like it was a thing for me. And I'm not like a format guy where I go like, I have to have large format. I don't need to have a full frame 35 millimeter camera to do my videos. It's not really necessary. So the cool thing though is that Blackmagic Design has worked with them to get Blackmagic RAW encoding with their the video assist. So that looks now more like an option, because Blackmagic RAW, I don't want to predict the future, so I'm not going to. But to me, Blackmagic RAW is like a breath of fresh air when it comes to codecs for video making, because you can use 7 different compressions. You got 3.1, 5.1, 8.1, 12.1, Q0, and Q5, so 6. I lied. So you got 6, and the compression that they use and the way that they encode it is very useful, and it's very, very fast. It's as fast as ProRes, but it has more utility than like 10-bit ProRes, and you can get it at all those other compression rates, which is amazing, and the picture quality is good. So I think it's awesome. Now, it also has ProRes RAW, from my understanding. And here's how I feel about this. ProRes RAW, to my understanding, is not really supported by Resolve at all at this point, and I'm not sure in the future how much they're going to support it. I just don't know. They probably will if it becomes used more often. But what I've seen, and the reason I haven't used it really, is because Apple likes to keep their stuff on Apple platforms. So, having utility of something like ProRes RAW on other platforms makes it a lot harder. So a lot of people had to kind of work around them to get it to work. Same thing happened with Blackmagic RAW, but they had the SDKs open, et cetera, et cetera. So, but when it comes to grading, if I'm going to grade RAW, I'm going to be doing it in Resolve. I'm not going to be using Final Cut. I'm not going to be using Premiere, because my preferred tool is DaVinci Resolve. So, that's part of the problem. But the other thing is that from what I've seen from people using ProRes RAW is it has limitations that Blackmagic RAW doesn't have. So not only does it not have the multiple compression rates, like I think it has 2, but RAW has the 6 different compression rates. But also with ProRes RAW, there's some limitations to it where you can't use certain controls. Now, someone had mentioned in the chat earlier something about someone had mentioned something in the chat saying that or asking about being able to change ISO with Blackmagic RAW versus ProRes RAW. My feeling is that the ISO thing is not really like I don't really care, because really with ISO, the only thing you're really doing is adding positive or negative gain. You can either do that with an exposure slider or you can do it with ISO. So really there shouldn't be much of a difference. The only real difference, like if you go into Blackmagic Resolve and you go and, you know, set the exposure ISO for at 100 and 200 and 400, and then you go to the exposure slider and you compensate with it, you'll get pretty much the same image. The only difference is that the middle values kind of like are a little bit different. They're like slightly different. So, you know, that's really the only difference. It's either going to let you add positive and negative gain with no real detriment to the image. Like basically, as long as the exposure slider does the same thing as if you recorded natively at those different ISOs, then I'm fine. But not every camera is going to provide those kinds of ISO choices, because not every camera is going to be ISO invariant. Canon cameras, for example, unless there's been a change, they're not ISO invariant. They when they take the image and you move the exposure around in post, you're taking that analog signal that's been, you know, kind of baked in, and you're moving it. Whereas in something like the Fuji camera I'm using right now, if you shoot at ISO 400 or 800, the actual file is no different except for the metadata that's been pushing it. But that also depends on which ISO range. Some ranges are ISO invariant and other ranges aren't. If you ever needed to look and see where those ranges are probably changing, go to photons to photos, and you can see like where there's a spike. Like you'll see it go like you'll see a chart go like this, and then it'll spike up and then it'll go down again. So that's usually where you can tell where those different ranges might be. But yeah, so like the ISO thing is not what bothers me. What bothers me is that from what I saw with using ProRes RAW was that when you shoot it, it doesn't tell the NLE or the grading software, it doesn't tell it what the Kelvin rating was. So you'll start at like a 0 rating, regardless of if you shot it at 3200 or 5500, right? So the problem with that is, let's imagine that you shot 4 different cameras, and each one of them, the camera operator forgot to set the white balance. Well, it's easy to get them all to match if you shoot it in BRAW, because all you have to do is go to the Kelvin number and punch in what you want it to be. If you want them all to start at 5500 Kelvin, you punch in 5500 Kelvin and you copy and paste that to every camera, and you've white balanced everything. You know, you white balance one of the cameras, you white balanced all of them, right? But with ProRes RAW, it's not the same thing. If they're all starting at 0 and you have to slide it one way or the other, you're going to have to white balance each one of those cameras manually to get them right. And then you'll have to match them all up. That sucks. You should not have to do that with RAW. Cinema DNG allows a Kelvin rating. I believe that the Reds do. I mean, there's tons of other RAWs that allow it. So the fact that ProRes RAW doesn't allow that, at least in what I've seen, if anyone wants to correct me, please send me a video or an image that shows me otherwise, so that I'm not sounding like an idiot. Because if I'm totally wrong, then it makes ProRes RAW more useful for me, and that's all good. But I'm just telling you what I've seen. So maybe at some point, ProRes RAW will allow you to set the Kelvin, but until then, it's not really going to be a thing for me. So yeah, and I think the good thing about this is, here's what I'm hoping, is that there's actually going to be more work between Sigma and Blackmagic Design together, because I think both are making really good products. Like I like Sigma lenses a lot. It does what I want. I know some people hate them. That's fine, but I like them. And also the L mount is an open mount. So wouldn't it be great if Sigma worked with Blackmagic Design to create a new camera, and it works flawlessly with Sigma glass in L mount, and it provides like really good autofocus tracking and all those kinds of things that people want with modern lens designs. One of the issues that Sigma's had I think, is that they've always been a third party, you know, and then they tried to make their own cameras and not a whole lot of people buy them. But if you had it where Blackmagic Design, you know, a company that's an upstart, went against Sigma, who's been trying to challenge manufacturers like Zeiss for optical quality in their lenses, you can get a partnership between them to get the kind of products that I would like to have. I would love it if all my Sigma glass can work perfectly in an L mount. Yeah, that would be awesome. So that's how I feel about that. I would love to see more cooperation between them. You know, what'd be really cool is to get at least a prototype of a Foveon sensor cinema camera, even if it only works at the native ISO. I would love to see Blackmagic RAW with the Foveon sensor, see how that would work. That would be awesome. If you've never seen images out of a Foveon sensor, you really need to look at it. Pound for pound, like 16 megapixel versus 16 megapixel. Man, the Foveon sensors kill it at the native ISO, but high ISO sucks on them. But man, the detail, the lack of artifacts in the final rendered image that I've seen out of those Foveon sensors, dude, they're awesome. So, I mean, that's like me pipe dreaming, but I'd love to see that. Yeah, that's what I have on that. I would, you know, Sigma FP, a lot more, you know, usable. It's still, to me, a little bit expensive for what I would get. You know, if they brought that down to about pocket 4K level, I can see them selling a hell of a lot of those cameras. But I mean, you don't get it's like, you know, very, very small. You don't have a viewfinder. You have to like get an external viewfinder. It's only like the back screen. I don't know why that's a new thing of making these cameras without a viewfinder. If I'm shooting photos, I need to have the viewfinder for my eye. Like that, the 3 points of contact are important. But for a video camera, like not bad. Like for the price, you know, with Blackmagic RAW, not bad. So makes a little bit more sense now. So I'll do one more topic and then I'll go into a little bit of the Q&A that's in there. I'll write a little break here. Oops. Break. Okay. So the next thing, since we're talking about camera manufacturers and stuff like that, I wanted to talk about color science and when it matters. Now, I've talked about this before, but I just want to make sure I'm very clear with this. What I don't want, like from people who follow this channel, is for you to think that you have to buy a camera in order for you to have a certain look or to get good colors, or even good mapping for your luminance values. I really want people who follow this channel to understand that most of those things are your choice on what you want to do, as long as you have the information captured to do it. Okay, so I don't want you guys thinking like you have to buy a Fuji camera in order to get Fuji colors. If you know what you're doing, you can shoot an image with any camera and get those same colors, as long as the data is there to do it. Okay, so you know the color science of the camera, though, it does and it doesn't matter. So I'm not an absolutist on this. Okay, I'm not on any team. There are cases where the color science that the manufacturer is putting in does matter, and there's other times where it doesn't matter really at all. Okay, so let's yeah, so you know, theoretically, if you had a camera that had no color science, it just had data, a third party or a programmer or somebody could just take that information and decode it to do whatever the hell they wanted. Okay, and that's how a lot of RAW works, and even you know, log encodings to an extent can allow the same kind of utility that can get you whatever colors and gamma that you want. Whatever you want to do with the luminance mapping, whatever you want to do with the color mapping, you can really do whatever you want with it, as long as the data is there. You know, the color science can be completely irrelevant other than just having the data to start from and then transform it into something else. Very similar to how, if you watched my newest video, where you take you create your own red eye PP2 LUT based on the LUT being made for one color space, and all you do is take the color science, right? It's the color science from the Pocket 4K, and you transform it into the red color space and gamma, and that way the LUT works properly. Now you could even take it a step further if you wanted and use a color card, a color checker, and have the color checker be you use the color checker tool to conform the colors specifically to the red colors. You could either do it manually or you could do it through the automatic tool, and that way it would look indistinguishable from a red camera. It looks completely the same. Okay, so so let's talk about when it does matter. Okay, so when it does matter is for things like live events or news broadcast, because a lot of times with things that are live, or if it's a news broadcast, or if it's if you're doing like journalism, these are the kinds of areas where you're actually not really supposed to touch the footage. You're not supposed to go and correct someone's skin tones, really. You're supposed to just get the balance right, because you're supposed to be documenting what's actually going on. Okay, like you're not supposed to, like, say as a politician that you don't like, and you take a photo and then you like boost the saturation and then pump up the reds so they look like they have high blood pressure, or if it's a case like, I'm just going to say other people, where people like intentionally try to make their skin look more orange than it really does look in real life. Okay, so you're not really supposed to do those things, and the color science of the camera will matter in those cases, because you're not really supposed to adjust it. You're not supposed to change it, really. It's supposed to document what really happened. Okay, and it's for quick turnarounds. If you're doing something live, you can't just go and like fix it in post, right? So those are the kinds of places where the color science probably matters more. For stuff like fast turnarounds, where let's say you're using a camera that you just never used before, backup or whatever, and you had to shoot something real fast and you're just going to be editing it. Well, if you don't have a prepared way of post-processing the image later on, the color science will make more sense, because you don't have even a LUT to slap on the end of it. You're going to have to rely on the camera to get things looking right. And here's where a lot of people have trouble with a lot of the older Sony cameras, because the skin tones didn't look 100% right to them. It's easy to fix if you just color correct it in post. It really is, if you know what you're doing, and especially if you use color checkers. But it can be annoying when you don't have those things available to you. If someone doesn't give you color checkers, somebody shoots in a really weird situation, or doesn't give you enough time to make the corrections that you need to make, then that can be a problem. And therefore you're relying on the color science. That's why a lot of people, especially who do stuff like this, would rather shoot with like a Canon camera, because they'll claim the skin tones look better. On certain people it does, other people it doesn't. But that's why people say that, and that's when it will make sense. That's when it will be useful. Okay, if you're recording 8-bit codecs, if you're recording any 8-bit codec, I don't care if it's a good log for 8-bit, the color science is going to matter more than it would on a 10 or a 12-bit log encoding, because the amount of room you have to push and pull colors to do what you want is going to be far less than in other codecs. Okay, so that's where it's going to matter, and you're going to have to make sure that you pick a picture profile in camera that works too. Sometimes it can be the case where you can import a LUT. If you can import a LUT into the camera and get it to do exactly what you want, then the color science might not matter so much, because it will actually transform it to do the kind of color you want anyway. Okay. And the last thing is lack of skill or knowledge in correction and grading, which is fine. If you don't have the skill or knowledge to do color correction and color grading, or you just don't want to learn it and you just want to make content, and you're like, I just want it to look as good out of camera as possible with me doing as little work as possible, then that's all fine. Then you do that. You're limiting yourself, obviously, but sometimes you might say, well, I don't really care about that. I care more about telling a little story that I want to tell without worrying about this particular thing. I'll focus on these other areas. Totally fine. Okay. When it doesn't matter, when the color science of the camera doesn't matter, if you're shooting raw or robust 10 or 12-bit encoded files, it doesn't really matter. Okay. if you're doing that, most likely you should have a long-term enough post-production pipeline to allow at least some correction and grading. And the best thing to do is actually, before you shoot the actual product, you have a LUT, or you have a power grade, or you have a way of doing the grade that is already set up. Like, you already have a pipeline set up, so you basically plug and play. And a lot of people do that who own production department. Well, you should, if you're either running a production department, or if you're doing your own thing, or whatever it is. If you're running a business, especially where time is always money, you should always have a post-production workflow set up already. So it's just like a plug and play situation. You know, you have like maybe 5 or 6 looks, you know which cameras you're using, you throw those in, and you make the tweaks where you need it, right? So, you know, in those cases, like, you could shoot with a Canon, you could shoot with a Sony, you can shoot with a Fuji, you can shoot with whatever camera. It won't really matter as long as it can encode enough data to get the colors that you want, okay? And we've seen this where people have gone through lengths to try to make, you know, a Pocket 4K or a GH5 or a number of different cameras look exactly like an Alexa, which in real life, you know, that's usually just the generic look you get out of the Alexa. Because if you watch movies shot with the Alexa, they don't all look the same, do they? Right? They don't all look the same. They're graded to look totally different often. You know, the look of Dark is totally different than the look of Yellowstone. I don't know which camera shot what. It doesn't really matter. It's irrelevant. The looks of them are totally different. The look of The Crown season 1 is freaking gorgeous, and it's shot on a Sony F55. So, you know, it, even with that, you know, trying to make it match the looks of like an Alexa, it's really just the generic look out of it, not much else, right? So, and you can always, if you're shooting in like robust 10 and 12-bit kind of codecs, you can always adjust the colors to taste. So it really doesn't matter at that point. And especially if you're using color checkers, where you can automatically match it to any color science really that you want, or do a quick manual adjustment to get the, you know, cameras to match. Dude, it's really easy. It doesn't even take any kind of expertise to do that. It just takes, you know, knowing the mechanical skills of moving the little thing around the color checker and hitting the button. So it makes it really, really easy. So, yeah, I mean, and also it doesn't really matter as long as you have the skill or knowledge to correct and grade the footage. If you don't have it, that makes sense. You know, either you need to learn it so that it becomes irrelevant, or, you know, make the conscious choice not to learn it because you don't really feel like doing it, which, you know, that's your choice. You can do whatever you want. I'm just saying, like, that's how it is. All right. So I'll check the Q&A in here. Phone booth. Yeah, I think that, yeah, that was another one. How do you guys like my quarantine hair? How do you like that? All the places I usually go to are all closed down, so I haven't gotten a haircut in a really long time. Now I'm seeing it, and it's just like bam. Good to see you on, Buckman. Good to see you on. Just got off work. Your IPP2 workflow has turned out good images for me since you uploaded the other day. Cool, man. I'm glad to hear it. I did look at your footage. I think I remember you saying that you were having some problem with Greencast. I didn't see it in the footage that I was seeing, and I'd have to look at what the situation is. If you're shooting, if it's like the stuff that you were shooting outside where there's a lot of grass, or if you're like, you see this window behind me, okay? If you're getting the reflection of the light off of green, you're gonna get a green cast. Doesn't matter what camera you use, doesn't matter what you do with it. So, you know, you'll have to deal with that. There's a number of ways you can deal with it. The easiest way is to take green saturation and just pull it down a bit, or to take that green and try to bend it towards something like yellow. If it's like on the skin that you're worried about, you can bend it toward yellow, because the priority should be skin tones over green, in my opinion. And then secondary is green, because our eyes, some of us are colorblind, but usually the way that our eyes see things is skin tones. We know usually when they're wrong, and then green, because we see it so often. Our eyes are really attuned to green. So unless you're colorblind, which I think you might have said that you are. I don't remember. It might have been somebody else. Yeah, if you're having a problem with Greencast, that would be the issue. If it's a problem with Yellowcast, you can also deal with that by just pulling yellow saturation down. Usually it's more obvious on skin. Thoughts about 3:1 over constant quality, or doesn't really matter playing on YouTube? On YouTube, it probably won't matter that much. If I'm not going to do it right now because I don't remember where the statistics are on it, but if you go to analytics for videos on YouTube, the vast majority of things are watched in like HD quality. A lot of people are watching things on their phones. They're watching them on tablets. They're watching them on their computers. A lot of people don't even have 4K screens. So even if you were watching something 4K, you're not really going to see the full resolution. So my opinion is that if it's YouTube that you're worried about, the biggest bottleneck for quality is actually going to be the distributor, which is the main problem that a lot of cinematographers especially have complained about, because depending on how, say, Netflix or Amazon Prime or YouTube or whatever distributor distributes your material, it's going to look good or it's not based on that more than it is going to be on the codec that you record. So for YouTube kind of stuff, it's just going to be like the quality of the stream is going to be the major barrier. It won't be 3:1, 5:1, 8:1, or 12:1. Probably I would say if you're shooting for distributing to a market of people that are like us, where we're looking for things, like we're looking for detail, we're looking to see a difference, we're looking for that kind of thing, and we're probably going to watch it in 4K. If you're delivering to people like us, there might be a slight difference, maybe between like 8:1 and 12:1, but not really between like 3:1 and 12:1. Not really in most cases. The only real differences that I've seen in when it's distributed through YouTube is the color. Two things: color and dynamic range. There's a clear difference between HDR and SDR when you're watching stuff on YouTube. And there's a clear difference between coloring that's done correctly and coloring that's done incorrectly, or like gamma values that are wrong. Okay, by wrong, I mean like people grading for a super dark environment when it's like a video that's usually going to be seen in like an office building, and the values are too dark. If you're bringing everything down too dark, for example, on YouTube, it's going to kill all the detail in the shadows, and you're just going to see a blocky mess, right? So those are the kinds of things that you should worry about more than 3:1 versus like 12:1 for compression. I use for pretty much everything I do 8:1 compression for most of it. And then if I am going to shoot like the 120 frames per second kind of stuff, like the super high frame rate, then I will pump up I'll pump it up to like 3:1 or 5:1, usually 5:1 because 3:1's like a lot of data. But that's usually when I'll do it, because the actual image, the size of it is going to be smaller because it's cropping in on the sensor. And that's where you'll actually see more of a difference between it. That's the other thing I didn't mention. If you're cropping in, like if you want to crop in like 1.5x to 2x, you'll see more of a difference between like 3:1 and 12:1 or 3:1 and 8:1 than you will otherwise. If you're just using the full image and you're rendering it, you probably won't see that much of a difference in the resolution or the quality on YouTube. But if you're cropping in a lot, that's where you probably will see a difference. So I hope that helps. Yeah, Cthulhu, thanks to your videos, I understand invariance. Wait, what? I thought invariance only works for RAW formats. It also works on Fujilog video. I apologize. I didn't mean to infer that it was working like that with their log video, because that's not the same thing. I was talking about how the photos work for the Fuji stills. So excuse me, that's my fault. I should have probably clarified. I was talking about if you take a still, like a RAW, right? If you have a Fuji camera and you shoot a RAW image, the ISO adjustment that you've made does not occur until after that image is taken. So when you've got the RAW file, right, when you've got the RAW image, like that's where the actual gain is being adjusted for your ISO value, if that makes sense. Okay, so I apologize for that. That's my fault for not being clear. So I do apologize for that. Didn't mean to confuse you. Pascal, a video on how to have perfect white balance the Tony way would be great. I've actually done that a few times. I haven't done a specific video about how to do that. Excuse me, I'm just going to take a drink. I didn't do a specific video about how to get like perfect white balance, but it's just giving yourself the right stuff in the image to get the right white balance. You need to have actual like white and gray cards and stuff like that in the image in order for you to get it right. And then for me, it's getting a broad. You have to get like a broad sample of it, because you'll see if you take like a medicine dropper and you move around on like a white shirt, you'll see the RGB values change. So the spot, like if I was wearing a white shirt, the spot on my shoulder here would have one white value, and then over here on this shoulder would be a different value depending on the ambience of the room, the kind of light source, if there's mixed lighting, all of those things matter. So it's more about getting the shot right to begin with and having the tools that you need to get proper white balance. I'm not the best person to ask about getting a proper white balance on a shot that has no white card or nothing that you can use to like guesstimate at least what white might be. So, and there's like 100 different ways of getting like white balance. Probably not 100, probably exaggerating, but there's several ways that I should say that you can get a white balance that aren't, using the sliders. You can use RGB curves. You can use the raw tab. You can use the sliders. You can even use like the hue saturation and hue curves, or the hue alone to kind of get things how you want with white balance. But the most important thing to take away with white balance is just having a color checker, color card in it. These are cheap, comparatively, like compared to not, having what you need. Like these are, hold on, I'm not centered. So which way do I go? This way. Okay. Here we go. Get this. Okay. And then you have, that's a big gray card for doing like an auto white balance if you need to. And then you have, this with all the colors, and it corresponds and resolves, so you can like easily get the colors to match what they're supposed to in post without really any effort. And then you've also got your white, gray, and black as well. So it's really not that difficult to do it. Sigma rubbing shoulders with both Blackmagic and Leica. Talk about having friends with different personality. Yeah. I think, I don't know what Sigma's ethos is. They definitely are companies that do things totally differently. Leica does not make equipment for the same people who are buying Blackmagic gear. That's for sure. Is the T5 discontinued? I hate those rumors, but they are getting rare in stores here. I don't know. To be honest. It might be just an issue that we might have to deal with. I know that they're trying to move over to the T7s. The stupid thing is that, now they're like wanting thumbprint ID. If I don't understand that for like drives, I don't get it. I don't get it. And I think that that's one of the issues that people are having with using them on cameras that are supposed to record to an SSD. I don't know. I don't know. Where the T5 leaves or someone else leaves, if there's a market for it, someone's going to jump into the pool. So I know that, what is it? Something Angel. There's an Australian company, if I remember correctly, that creates SSDs, and they have a specific SSD that is marketed as being for like the pocket cams. So that would be an alternative. I think they're a bit more expensive, but they work. We'll need raw footage with a color card to confirm Trump isn't the same color of a cheetah. Nobody looks how orange he looks sometimes in those photos. Like, there's certain times where you can tell that there's something wrong with the photo. Usually if you can take an image into post, like you can take it into Resolve and just look at the scopes, and you can usually tell if something was done to the image. It's very easy to see it. Yeah, Angel Bird. Yeah, cheap ass reviews. For post-production workflow, what do you like to use? A preset power grade. In the past, you mentioned a global color space transform, then nodes for contrast, white balance, etc., and an RLET at the end of the nodes. Yeah. So I think what you're talking, the thing with me is like, I'm not like hard set on like going, okay, this is the only workflow, the best workflow or whatever. I try to stay away from that, because depending on who you are and how you like to work, you either will agree with that or not. And usually it's personal preference. For me, the easiest way is using Resolve Color Management or ACES. ACES is really great when you have an input transform that works properly. When you don't, it can be really annoying and can be a headache. So it's getting easier, but like the two workflows that I do on a regular basis are if I'm trying to match stock footage to each other, because one of the important things that I do is have to find proper stock footage to add to videos. But the problem is that like everybody on Getty or wherever it is that you might get it from, doesn't matter what stock footage company it is, every contributor or artist will have their own way of doing the look in the image. So what I have to do to make sure that the look matches what I'm trying to do in whatever the video is I have to conform them all to the same look. So using ACES, and I use the ACES node-based workflow in Resolve to do it, because I don't really like the stuff going on under the hood in ACES, because sometimes there's weird artifacting when you do it that way. Like the ACES color management in Resolve doesn't work as good, in my opinion, as the node-based workflow for ACES. I'd rather use the ACES color space transforms to do the work rather than everything being done under the hood. So with that, that workflow for me works really great, because there's a Rec 709 input device transform, and then I use an LMT and do minor adjustments in the LMT, and then spit out on the end of that node tree an ACES out, and in one node I can basically do all of the fixes that I want, and all of them look the same. Okay, I would do a video on that, except for I don't have anybody I'm not going to pay the amount of money that it takes to get a bunch of stock footage to do that. So if there's a stock footage company that wants to give me a bunch of stuff to like show people how to do it, I have no problem doing that, but I'm not going to pay for it, because it's very, very expensive to get stock footage for that. But that's how I do that. And then if I'm doing regular work, I use Resolve Color Management, because it takes care of a lot of issues, or not issues, but it takes care of a lot of the pipelines or the pipes that I'd usually put in to do a grade. And then all I have to worry about is doing the actual grade, like the white balance and all those things. So in the Resolve Color Management, I use the red IPP2 mapping. That's what I use all the time. And I either use the high contrast, very soft roll off, or I use the medium contrast and the soft roll off. Those are the two that I use all the time. So depending on what it is, I'll pick one or the other. And that works really, really great. the thing that you're talking about with having the global color space transform nodes and all that, basically what you can do is if you want to basically do the same kind of thing as resolve color management or whatever, but you do it manually, you can create a group. You have a before timeline, the timeline, then the post timeline. No, that's not the right way to say it because those aren't the right words. It's the pre and the post, and then you have your timeline grades, and then you have another one that's called timeline, but I won't talk about that. So you'll have the pre stuff in the group will be like something like your color space transforms or whatever specific things that you're going to do to everything in that group, and then you'll have for the on that node tree for that individual clip. That's what it's called. It's called clip, not timeline. I'm an idiot. It's the pre-clip, clip, post-clip, and then you have timeline. So pre-clip, you do your color space transform. Clip, you'll do whatever it is on that individual clip that you need to do. And then on the post-clip, you can put your LUT, or you can put like your textures or whatever. By textures, I mean like your film grain, or you can add your sharpening, all that kind of crap. Okay, so sorry for getting the nomenclature messed up. That's my fault for not remembering. Okay, let's see here. Might be combining techniques. Yeah, Cheap-ass reviews. Try stuff out and find out what works for you. For some people, they love LUT-based workflows, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you like it, then you do it. For me, I do what I do because it's fast. So, okay. Alrighty. So let's see here. Next thing, cinema versus non-cinema lenses. Yeah. So the first thing, the reason why I'm bringing up stuff like this, by the way, is because I still think that there's some confusion about things, because I'll see comparison videos and be like, oh, look, this lens that's $10,000 has the same look as this lens that's like $100. There's no difference, like, is their conclusion. That's wrong. Okay, I can understand if you want to say in terms of image quality that there's no real difference to you. That's totally fine. Okay, that's your opinion. But to say that, oh, well, you'll be wasting your money on a cinema lens because the image looks the same it's not accurate. So I'll talk about that. Cinema lenses usually have they definitely in most, I just can't think of a case where they don't have this, but on the equivalent kind of lens, they usually have a more robust housing and mount that's made to last for a long time and to deal with the rigorous and issues of using stuff on set and having to mount and unmount a lot and having to put them in bags. Sometimes things get bumped around a little bit. With a plastic lens, that even if it had the same image quality, if you have a 50 millimeter that looks 250 millimeter lenses, this 50 f1.8 and this 50 t2.2, and they're the exact same optical design, the lens that's made out of plastic, you don't know what'll happen to it if it drops or whatever. With the more robust housings, they probably won't break as easy. Okay, so that's one thing. There's marked points for their focal lengths, their focus, that kind of thing. Okay, so those marked points are important because you can make sure that the lens is actually performing the way it's supposed to by checking those things. If it's like, you set 2 meters on the focus, you measure 2 meters, it should be perfectly accurate. So it makes it so you can actually measure out, you can actually measure out, where your subject's going to be, and you can be sure that the mark that you put down for your actor, right? You will know that when they hit that mark, and as long as the focus puller is hitting their mark at that 2 meters, it will be perfectly in focus every single time. Okay. You can actually get your whole set all like put together with the marks and everything without the camera really even being there. You can do it with tape a lot of times, as long as you make sure that the focal plane's right there. Sometimes you can just set up the camera, you have you make sure you're measuring to the focal plane, and you measure out where things are going to be. So it gives you repeatable focus every single time, and you know that it's going to hit it every time. The lenses are often far more carefully run through quality assurance to make sure that there's no issues and that they're all made to spec. Okay, so that ensures the accuracy and the repeatable results. And often there's ways that you can adjust them yourself. Sometimes it's a back focus thing that you can adjust, especially on broadcast lenses. And then for other cinema lenses, if there's a back focus issue, you'll have to put in shims or something else. But you'll know, just by basic testing, you'll know exactly where things are supposed to be and if your lens is off. With a stills camera lens, like, it's not the same. Okay, no matter how good the image quality is, it's not exactly the same. The specifications will be different. A lot of times they focus past infinity rather than going to infinity for like a stills lens. Whereas for and it's hard to measure that. But for a cinema lens, it should be accurate, like totally accurate where it's supposed to be. And it does matter more with those kinds of lenses. There's standardized front threads, okay? So that they all fit onto the matte box or whatever it is you're putting in the front consistently, okay? They have, if it's like a zoom, they won't be telescoping, which makes sense also for a matte box. If it's focusing, it won't be externally focusing. Just to show you the difference, right? Real world example. This Canon 50 f1.8. Okay. Let's see if you can. Actually, we'll do this with it. Okay. Okay. See how it moves? See how the lens is telescoping as I focus? See that? That will not happen with a cinema lens. If I had a matte box on this, it'd be moving around, which is a problem. Okay. Let's refocus. I don't use autofocus, so you have to excuse me. I don't trust it. So, that's a pretty big difference. It does make a difference. Even if that 50 f1.8 was the same as a cinema lens, the fact that has that external focusing versus internal focusing is a big difference. Cinema lenses usually are color matched across a line. If you buy, Zeiss CP2s, they're all going to have the same colors across the line. Okay, they're all going to have the same look across the line. They make sure that they all have the same kind of look, so you don't have like a situation where the flaring looks different between different focal lengths or whatever. They make sure that they have a consistent look, so you can make sure that your movie or whatever it is you're making has a consistent look and that the lens doesn't get in the way. They also have T-stop indicators instead of f-stop indicators for the accuracy of exposure across lenses in a line. So, I mean, it's really with any lens. The T-stop is different than an f-stop. A T-stop's the measurement of how much light's actually getting through the lens, whereas the f-stop is a different calculation, okay, which is based on the diameter of different parts of the lens and what kind of field of view not field of view. Okay, I'm not going to go into the whole explanation of what the different those different things are. Just know this difference, okay? The f-stop and the t-stop are different, okay? T-stop is a measurement of light. The f-stop is a measurement of the back diameter to the rest of the things in the lens, okay? So the thing is that with a t-stop, the difference being with a t-stop indicator versus an f-stop indicator is that it is measured to be sure that if you're, say I'm trying to expose for a t-stop of 5.6, okay, that if I'm doing wides, mediums, and close-ups, that no matter what lens I put on, if I set it to T5.6, it's the same exposure across each lens. With, like that Canon I just had, the f-stop is not a measurement of the light going through. It's a completely different measurement. Okay, sometimes they're related, but they're not the same thing. So if I take a lens that is f5.6, this Canon 50 f1.8, I have it set to f5.6 versus a 135 set to 5.6 from the same manufacturer. The t-stops could be totally different. That's why you'll have something like the Sigma f1.8 sisters, the 18 to 35 and the 50 to 100. The t-stop is a 2 versus 1.8 because the t-stop's different from the f-stop. Okay, and some people have complained about certain lenses that say they have a rating of like an f2.8 when really they're like way slower as far as the light getting through. So that's what's really interesting, is that if you actually do a t-stop reading of certain lenses, say if it's like, it says, oh, well, this lens is f2.8, so it's brighter and it's better for low light versus like a 3.5. Well, if the t-stops for those are actually the same, then the light gathering difference is not there. Okay. Also, I had the Canon 24 to 105 f4. The first version of that lens, the f-stop's the same between 24 to 105, but the t-stop is not the same. The t-stop has to be darker on the 105 versus the 24. And I know that because I used it several times on interviews, and I always had to expose differently for the longer, the camera that had the longer focal length. And it'd be two of the same lens, 24 to 105 f4 series 1, okay, or version 1. And the 105 would need, the one that was at 105 would need one exposure, and the one that was at 50 would need a different exposure. Okay, so there is a difference. Things that they usually don't have autofocus. They usually don't, well, there's a lot of them that don't deliver EXIF data. Like, I think that the big problem that people are having with the PL mounts is that there's no EXIF data going through. There's often not a whole lot of electronics in there. So if you're trying to do like an application, say you want to control the lens like with one of these just through the camera, it doesn't really work because they don't have those kind of things in it usually. But I think some of that is going to change. So why are they used? Well, I kind of told you, right? The consistency across the image and the utility of them. That's one of the main things, consistency and utility, okay? And you can get repeatable, predictable results when you use those kinds of lenses, which is really important for movies that are going to spend like millions and millions of dollars. I mean, if you're talking about how expensive really, really top talent actors are, and your focus guys can't get, your team can't get the shot in focus no matter what they do because, you're using a lens that doesn't, have accurate readings, and it keeps like missing focus because the actual marking is changing, right? Then you're wasting your money, right? That kind of, the amount of money that it costs to like reshoot a scene or reshoot like a shot over and over and over and over and over again, especially if you're using like explosions or you have practical effects like the squibs that blow up when someone gets shot, things like that. Or let's say you're using actors who are stunt guys, and you really probably have maybe one or two shots of getting it because a stunt guy could go, look, I've got two of these in me. You're going to set me on fire. I've got one of those in me. If you can't get the guy on fire in focus or whatever it is that you need in order to get the shot, guess how expensive that shot's going to be? It's going to be more expensive than the lenses cost, right? So, that's where that kind of thing actually matters more than the cost of the lens, right? Saving a few $1,000s on the lens is not really much of a savings when at the net you're losing by not having that safety, okay? So, sometimes it is because of the look or the image quality, but, I have a hard time justifying that kind of argument because a lot of times you have the same optical designs between two lenses. Like, the cinema version of a lens will be the same optical quality or the same optical formula as the cinema version. So it's not always that. There's a lot of other things that go into it. Okay. So, what you're probably asking is like, do I need them? Right? Well, I don't. Right? But do you need them? If all you're worried about is the image quality or the look, I would say no, you don't need a cinema lens because of the look. Okay, I'll just say that flat out. You don't need it because of that. Okay, because there's plenty of lenses, plenty of manufacturers that whatever look you're going for, you could probably find it without buying a cinema version. Okay, and the expenses for having a set of cinema lenses is probably not going to be worth it for, most people are doing the regular work that we do. We're talking about like weddings, corporate work, interviews, an average consumer doing travel stuff. I mean, all of those things, I can't see a reason to really need to have a cinema lens because you're not really going to need it. And frankly, a lot of times the things that people need, like for weddings, I can't imagine shooting a wedding without autofocus. Even for video, it would be very hard. Like, you can't really predict how people are going to move. And if you miss the shot, it's done. You miss the shot in a wedding, you can't do it again. You don't get any do-overs. You don't get a take two. So in those kinds of situations, I would say, having a cinema lens, which usually don't have autofocus or anything like that, probably not worth it at all. I would say that most people, if you're doing like corporate stuff, and of course I'm talking about like shooting meetings, shooting boardroom things, shooting like instructional video, shooting educational stuff, all those kinds of things. You could probably do all of it with a 24-105 f4 type of lens most of the time and a decent camera. Okay. And I'm talking about a photography version, not a cinema version. If you're doing broadcast, it'll be different. Broadcast, you need a whole different kind of thing. You'll usually need electronics to make sure that you can actually use tools to rock focus and rock zooms and stuff like that in and out to where it has easier control. So it's a little different with broadcast news and stuff like that. But if you're doing like narrative work and you need to ensure that you're getting the shot every time and that kind of thing, or you're shooting commercials where it's higher end and you need to make sure that you nail the shots every time, and that your lenses are all, everything is going to be predictable, all that kind of stuff. And you can't really keep retaking shots over and over. And you're not really going to use a whole lot of other electronic type of stuff. You're going to be using, focus pulling devices and stuff like that. Then yeah, it would probably be worth it for you. But if you're watching my stuff, dude, you already know if you need it or not anyway. So if you're watching me right now, the chances are, like, I would say it's a 99% chance you don't need them. And by not needing them, I mean mostly for buying purposes. Okay, I don't think there's anything wrong with renting stuff. And depending on if you want to do narrative, let's say you do like corporate stuff, and you do normal kind of production, and on the side you want to do some narratives, you could probably use the lenses you already have. But if you want to play around, which is totally fine, right? It's like, Da Vinci, when he did the Last Supper, he was playing around with a color palette that didn't work. Not a color palette, new paint that didn't work right. It was flaking off, and it was a problem. But that's besides the point. If you want to play around with a different way of doing your stuff, I don't see any reason not to do that. I don't think you should go out and just buy a set like that. I don't think you should just go out and just buy a whole set of like $10,000 worth of lenses. But just rent them. If you shoot something that is a period piece and you've got the Sigmas, right? The Sigma 18-35 and 50-100, you might not really want to use those for that because they're just too good of lenses for that kind of thing. You might want to get something like the Cooke Pancros and rent those for that kind of thing, or something similar, which would be great. If you want to rent a set of cinema lenses and see how they work, like totally do that. But for the most part, like the kinds of normal work that people do on a regular basis, I can't say that cinema lenses are really made for you. That's part of the reason why they're so expensive. And I always was a little confused why, people were weighing on the Rokinons for normal stuff. I was like, why are you going to get a Rokinon set for regular stuff? Like if you're doing regular corporate stuff or regular things that most people are going to be doing with cameras, it doesn't really make sense to buy cinema lenses at all, in my opinion. Because they're not really going to give you what I think you think they will. They'll actually have more like workarounds. I like it when I can use like an application and just change the focus like through the application. You can actually, like with some applications, set 2 focus points and have it pull focus for you to get like a smooth rack focus, which is awesome. So, you know, you can't really do that as easily. You need to get like, where is it? I have it around here, but the, you know, a wireless or a programmable focus pulling gizmo to make that work. But if you have, you know, fully electronic lenses, you can do that and it's a lot easier. Also, a lot of, I forgot to mention this, a lot of the cinema lenses don't have like optical image stabilization. So if you're doing a lot of handheld stuff, which I know a lot of people do for like travel and that, not having that kind of sucks. It does. So, yeah. So that's my feeling on it. I think that most people just don't need it, honestly. Let's see. Would you recommend affordable cinema lenses offered by the likes of Rokinon Samyang? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't buy a Rokinon Samyang cinema lenses at all. I don't really see a reason to get them, to be honest. I don't really see the benefit to getting those. There's a ton of different lenses that I think are superior optically that you could get that do the same thing. I'd rather get a set of Zeiss, you know, rather than getting like 2 Rokinon lenses or Samyang lenses, just get one good Zeiss prime, you know, the 2028 f2 ZEZF or the Milvis series 28, you know, that would be a great lens. You could use that and do a ton of things narratively. So I'd rather do that, to be honest. The big problem with the Rokinons is a build quality. If you're getting cinema lenses and the build quality is bad, then you have to ask yourself what's going on. Why would like I wouldn't trust that. So let's see. Got to get a tape measure for the Fuji. Hit your marks. I have a Samyang 35 millimeter V DSLR one. It was infinity at 3 meter mark, and second one had no infinity. Bad quality testing. No idea if the zines have it too. My understanding is that the zines are the real cinema lenses that they make. That the optical quality, from my understanding, if I remember correctly, of course I only know from like looking at the differences that people have shown, is that there's not a huge difference in the optical quality, but the build quality is totally different, which is a major thing. And when you look at the build quality of something, you have to understand that if it's precision, if it's like a precision thing that you need, if you need those markings to be accurate, and the thing just doesn't even look very good, like it doesn't look like it's robust, it doesn't look like it's going to last very long, you have to ask yourself, how good can the internal stuff really be at that point? That's my worry about those kinds of lenses. I think that they're kind of like the placebo lenses. People will go, I'll buy a cinema lens because I want to be a serious filmmaker or whatever, so I'm going to get a serious lens, so I'm going to buy a cinema lens, not really understanding that you know, those kinds of lenses really do require precision engineering and precision manufacturing, and the quality assurance needs to be there, you know, for those markings and for it to actually work right. So that's my issue with a lot of those cheaper ones. If you want to get those lenses because they're just cheap, you know, you go, I want to get some lenses, these are cheap and I want them to do manual focus, I'd be like, sure. But as far as the use of a cinema lens, I can't speak too highly of them. See you later, DJ. I'm pretty sure you're going out on your walk, so have fun. All right. So Next thing, I want to talk about confronting cognitive bias and post-purchase rationalization. So the thing to understand is that we all have biases and we have to understand it. It's like, we can't deny things that are real. So we all have them. Okay. Whatever you bought is the best thing in the world. Whatever I bought is the best thing in the world. Your way of life is the best thing in the world for you. And then I will argue that my way of life is better than yours. So, we have to understand these biases. Okay. And they definitely are a thing with consumer behavior. And there's a whole thing, like if you ever learn, things about marketing and product creation and product management and that kind of stuff, you'll understand that regardless of the actual facts of the matter, people will stick by things because of a number of reasons. One of those things is like the brand. You remember the name of the brand. I just did this recently. I went to go buy barbecues, and the brand I ended up buying was a Weber. You know why? Because my grandparents told me a long time ago that the only barbecue worth buying was a Weber. So that's what I buy because I don't know anything about barbecues. So that's what I bought. And I didn't even realize that was going on until I'd already bought the Weber. And I was like, why did I do that? Oh, well, this is why, right? We do this with brands all the time. My opinion is the thing about Mac being so popular still is that people just like the brand. Used to make really great stuff. My opinion is now not so great. Okay. That's my opinion. Right. But I do think that there's bias when it comes to branding, especially where people just think because it has this brand on it, that must mean it's good quality. Sometimes it can have a brand you've never heard of, and it can be better quality than any brand out there. So, those are facts, but people will still argue the opposite. So just to kind of bring more context into why I'm talking about this was that Gerald Undone, a YouTuber that I actually really like, he did a review of a Z-Cam. I think it was the E6 or whatever, like their full frame 35 millimeter one. And he had some negative things to say, but they weren't like, things that were non-constructive. They were like, here's an issue. And, these kinds of things would need to be fixed, in my opinion, in order for this to be like something that I would use. Right. And so the Zcam crew, I guess, like the people who, like Zcam, were all upset because he was finding issues with the camera. And they were saying things that were just factually untrue. Okay. Saying like, oh, well, the reason why, you had this data loss was because you were recording ProRes. Well, he shows like live during the stream where he confronts people about this, how it's not the case, that it's not just the codec, it's the camera, right? And it's a number of things that were kind of a problem with the camera that for him would be an issue, which is why he brought it up to begin with, right? So the thing is, like, people were denying the existence of reality, okay? Because they're so, biased in their brand loyalty that they weren't getting it, okay? That is the kind of thing that I believe is a real problem when any of us try to really talk about products. Okay. That if you're someone who bought the thing or you're familiar with the brand, right? Like you're familiar with the brand or you're familiar with the camera or whatever, just because you don't have issues or you don't care about some of the issues that might exist doesn't mean that they don't exist. Okay. So we need to understand that we do have these biases, okay, and recognize them when they're happening. So post-purchase rationalization, it's just something that everyone's doing. You try to rationalize, you make a purchase. And a lot of times this happens like, nobody even asked you, right? And this happens to me a lot. Like, I'll be like, oh yeah, I bought this thing. It has the best this, it got the best ratings through this. It does all these great things. And you'll like just talk up the product that you bought. And really what you're doing is rationalizing your own decision. You're not actually interested in sharing what's going on, right? You're rationalizing within your own brain. Like I made the right choice, right? Like I bought the right thing. Okay. And we all do it. All right. So, and I think that this is why certain people will defend a brand or defend a product when really what they're doing is denying reality sometimes. Okay. So, if someone say like, I have the Pocket 4K, right? Great camera. I love it. But if someone was to say, let me get it out. If somebody was to say, man, the fact that it has one mounting point is a real issue. Like when I put it on the stand, I put it on my tripod and I lock it down, it just like moves back and forth when I try to pull focus. It's really irritating. And if I said, it doesn't do that, it only has one mounting point, but it never does it. I never had that problem. Well, dude, people can show that. Okay. And the fact is that this camera does have that problem. I like this camera. It's amazing. But the single mounting point, I have to correct it with getting a bunch of stuff. Okay. I wouldn't have a bunch of things connected to it on the base if having a single mounting point wasn't really a problem. Okay. Same thing with these stupid doors. These suck. If someone said, man, I hate these doors on the camera, the doors for like the HDMI and all these things and how cramped it is really sucks. Like when I try to plug stuff in there, it's really a problem. And if I go, oh, it's just how you're using it. Like you're not supposed to use all of the plug-in sockets. You're not supposed to do that. Well, you are supposed to do that. That would be me denying reality. The reality is that the design of this side of the camera is garbage. This sucks. Okay, everything going on here. Let me hold on. There. Everything going on this side of the camera sucks. Okay, the guts are fine. The preamps for like, not the 3.5 millimeter thing, but the preamps for the audio for the Mini XLR are fantastic. Okay. But if I was to deny the reality that this thing is an issue, that would be my bias being exposed. Okay. And so we need to understand that when we're trying to have like real rational discussions about things like products, I mean, it's just products, right? It's just stuff. It's not, your religion. It's not, no one's calling your mom ugly. Nobody is being nobody's saying anything personally to you. They're talking about a product. And try to use your logic there. So, I'll be the first one to say though, that if someone's making a problematic statement, like they're saying, oh, well, the Blackmagic Pocket 4K has bad color science, therefore it's not usable. I would be like, dude, you're wrong. Okay. You're just wrong. Okay. That is a factually untrue statement because people are able to get good images. Doesn't matter what the color science straight out of the camera is, you can get an awesome image out of it. Okay. So saying that it's just unusable is it's just wrong. Okay. If someone was to say, well, I use an SD card in it and it doesn't work. It just keeps corrupting my files. I'd be like, well, what SD card are you using? Is it approved through the manufacturer? Is the data rate, like the data transfer rate for the video that you're recording, is it too much for the card? Is it a problem with you? Right? Like in those cases, it might actually be a problem with the user. Okay. If the person was trying to use it in the way that it was supposed to, like when the Samsung T5 was the SSD or SSD drive that was it's in the marketing material. The fact that the T5 wouldn't connect with the Pocket 4K when you turned on the camera, like there was no defense of that. It was poor QA. It was poor quality assurance. Okay. And anybody testing that camera should have figured that out if they were testing cameras off the line to make sure that it worked with the things that were in their marketing material. So, even if you're a Pocket 4K fan, you had to say, to be logical and to be fair, you had to say, yeah, that's a problem. It shouldn't have been like that. Okay. You don't tell them, oh, you're not supposed to plug in the T5 SSD. You don't tell them, oh, you're not supposed to do that. Or you're wrong. That never happens when it does. Right. So, let's just make it where people like Gerald and Dunn do not have to come on to YouTube and do a live stream and tell everybody to behave, because and also to justify his claims. He shouldn't have had to do that live stream is my problem. He should never have had to do that. And my feeling is like I think he just should not have been, I don't want to say made, because nobody made him do it, but he shouldn't have felt like he had to talk about it. So hi Mosba, how are you doing? Check out the $1,000 sterling silver tin can from Tiffany's. Literally just a tin can. Yeah. I have the 4K, and yes, those doors suck. They do. They're the worst design choice for the whole thing. Rip the doors out with pliers. I would, except for I don't want dust or anything getting in there. If the 4K had Canon's dual pixel autofocus, it would be god tier for the money. Yeah, for sure. But that kind of technology you're paying for with the Canons. 4K def has some issues, but pros outweigh the cons. I totally agree. I think it's the best camera for the money. And it's actually, in my opinion, the best camera for people to learn on, because all of the issues that you will complain about with that, you usually are going to have with other cinema cameras, like, needing an external monitor, needing often several external monitors and some other things with it. It's just like, I have gripes. And if somebody made gripes that were about things that were totally fair to complain about, I'm not going to just tell them that you're wrong to complain about it, or that you don't have your complaints are irrelevant, or that they don't exist. I mean, those things do exist. And the good thing is that if we have complaints, right, we make those complaints known or those issues known, and then the manufacturer fixes the problems in the next iteration or in a firmware update. The thing with the Samsung SSD, because people, actually my video was being shown to people like through forums to show a workaround, but that workaround should not have had to occur. And eventually that SSD connectivity problem was fixed. So it was useful. Okay. So, all right. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is going to be uncomfortable, but I'm going to do it anyway. I feel like it's important because I want to be honest with the people that are in that are subscribers to my channel. Okay. And this is because I sometimes attend live streams with other YouTubers, and I just want to have my ear to the ground on what's going on, and I'll often like listen to this stuff or whatever while I'm working. And one person, I've talked about the individual before. I don't name names because I don't know. I don't want to start like crap with anybody. And I made my opinion known on their meme that they posted. They posted something that said, they posted a meme that said the following. They said, 7 things school doesn't teach you: how to sell, how to think, how to face failure, how to manage time, how to invest money, how to start a business, or how to find your passion. Nothing in that statement's true. Nothing. 0 of that is factual. Okay. So the reason why I get annoyed with stuff like this is because people, and this is why I talked about the segment right before this about, bias, is because people trick themselves into believing stuff like that. Okay. So I'm gonna say, I don't care how you learn things. Okay. You can learn however way works best for you. One of the big failures with any school system that's been going on for the longest time is that there's a failure to communicate effectively with learners who do not learn in very specific ways. That's a valid complaint. That's a complaint that I've always had about schools, is that they cater mostly to learners who learn in a very specific way, where you learn from someone talking at you. Okay. And then there's activities where you have to be someone who feels okay with being engaged in verbal, basically just discussions. Okay. If you're a very, very closed introvert, these are not good institutions for you to learn from, because you're going to have a hard time sharing your feelings and being able to do that and reciprocate that kind of behavior with each other in a school system. Or if you're somebody who learns visually, having a teacher that just talks at you in front of the class, it's going to be hard for you to learn. Valid complaint. I will totally be okay with that. But if you want to try to tell me that you can't learn those 7 things at school, you are completely wrong. You can learn those things. Whether or not you as an individual did learn those things is irrelevant. It's whether or not it's possible, or that it does or doesn't teach you those things. And you can be a perfectly good, learned, rational, smart, intelligent human being and never go to a single school. Okay, that's totally possible. You could be like, was it Will Hunting, right? In the movie Good Will Hunting, where he just reads books and he kind of gets it, and he's a smart person, right? Totally fine. The thing is, not everybody's like that. Okay, and Will Hunting didn't really know the value of what he was learning anyway until people talked to him about it, right? So those are the kinds of things that people don't think about. Okay, and we're not all geniuses. In fact, the vast majority of us are average, right? I would consider myself of average intelligence. And so I just want to go through these 7 things and explain to you how wrong this is. Okay, how to sell. Well, obviously, they never looked at a business degree, because you can get sales and marketing courses that are offered at any business college. How to think. In my school that I went to, and most schools, you have to take courses in rhetoric writing studies, where you learn the art of argumentation, which is done through the essay format. And you are basically like, you read, like the job is that you read arguments that are made by people. You decipher those arguments, and then you have to make your own arguments and formulate those on your own, and you make a claim, and then you back it up with evidence. Okay? The reason how it teaches you how to think is because it's not what you think in the essay that is graded. It's how you came to that conclusion and how you communicate it. Okay? So that's wrong on its face. Okay? The best place, in my opinion, so far to learn how to think is in college, only because you can get together with other people to talk about these things. Okay, so I'll just give an example. Philosophy courses, which are elective, but they do exist. You not only read things, read ideas, but you talk about them, and you try to find out what the truth is, and you debate it. You talk about it in class. You talk about it with the teachers. Sometimes they have an idea of what something means, and you have an idea of what something means. And with everybody working together, you can understand all of the different meanings from different philosophers and different thinkers. Okay. Just to give another example here, in political science class, which one was it? I can't remember which one it was, but we were talking about the federal government, and the guy, like, there was one guy in class who was complaining because he said that the reason why we had problems with deficits and all these issues is because we need to run the country more like a business. And he kept, talking about it. And you can either agree with me or not, but the important thing is I had a different opinion on this. I said, I don't understand how a country is supposed to be run by a business, when in my understanding of governments is that they work kind of in opposite of what a business is supposed to do. The vast majority of businesses are designed to accumulate profit for their shareholders, right? Like, that's the vast majority of businesses that exist. That's what they do. A government is there to provide goods and services and protection and all those things that are not always profit driven, especially when it comes to security. Is an army supposed to be a profit driven organization, for example? Are you supposed to make a profit off of your armies, or are you supposed to defend your country? Like, aren't those questions that are valid, right? So by having these discussions in class, you're communicating with other people, and you're learning how other people think, and you can formulate your own opinions. Okay. And the great thing about that class is that it was a class designed for people to discuss their opinions. Okay. So there's that. How to face failure. In universities, mentorship programs are encouraged across the board, and learning institutions really make that a core thing, especially if you talk to academic counselors. That's one thing that they try to get you to do, is find somebody either in your community or a professor or somebody that you can have as a mentor to you. And certain learning institutions and programs force you to have some kind of mentor. It's a requirement to have a mentor to help you through these kinds of things. And when you do fail courses or a test, or just like any situation you might ever fail in, the thing is that a school isn't going to force learning on you. It's impossible to force somebody to learn something when they're completely not really interested in learning something. If you're not interested in learning how to face your own failures, you'll never learn that. Doesn't matter where you go. Okay. But you can learn it at a school. And having the assistance from people like counselors, professors, a lot of times it's colleagues or other students. Other students are going to have the same kind of failures you had. You think that your failure to learn something or to do well on a test or whatever it is any different than anybody else's? Then, I got news for you. It's not. Okay. Everyone's gone through likely what you're dealing with. And there are more than enough people there to help you. When you're isolated and alone and you're trying to just watch YouTube videos to learn something, you don't have all those other people to help you. Okay. How to manage your time. I guess this person never heard of a project management course where they teach that literal thing. That's most of what you learn. Film school also teaches you that. You have to learn how to engage in meetings. You have to be able to stick to timelines. You have to make sure that the product is done on time. And a lot of that has to do with time management. You learn that throughout your study while you're at university. How to invest money. That was one of the things that I was like, I don't understand what they're saying, because I learned about money investments while I was in high school. We learned both about not only stock market investments, but also one of the things that a lot of people talk about is the investment of money into a school. In the United States, if you're not aware, if you're from a different country where you might have it paid through taxes for your tuition, in the United States, we usually have to take out loans. I had to take out a loan. And it was in that class where I learned that it was a good idea for me to invest in my future, because the teacher said, if you want to make more money, if all you care about is making money, then probably school is not really necessary, because there are a ton of ways that you can get involved in business that have nothing to do with really a university degree. But if you want to learn to be a more learned individual, regardless of what career you're in, then it's a really good investment. And I said, that's what I want. Okay. How to start a business. I guess this person never heard of entrepreneurial classes, which are offered at most colleges. In fact, I believe it's at every single college that has any kind of accredited business thing. In fact, the group that I work with, we just got done doing a revision of classes for their entrepreneurial program. It's a whole program about it. There's a business administration program, right? And then entrepreneurial studies is its whole program. So that's just wrong. And we had people come in who were entrepreneurs who took the courses and took the program. And some of them were people who already owned a business. Some of them were people who were just wanting to learn how to start a business, say they were a hair cutter or a hairstylist or whatever, and they wanted to start their own salon and they wanted to learn how to do that. Well, they would take the course and then they would start on their journey of becoming an entrepreneur, where you learn the same stuff that you learn at any other place that teaches you how to do business administration, how to run your own business, how to start your own business, how to do sales and marketing, all of those things. So, of course, you can learn how to start a business by going to a school. And lastly, find your passion. Of course, you can learn where your passion is when you're in school. I learned mine while I was in school. Okay. Originally, I went to school to learn to be an MD. And I didn't really have much desire to do that. I was just doing it because my parents told me that was a good idea. And eventually I said, you know what? It was after I took a film studies course in the summer. And I said, I'm switching to film because I love that. I want to do that for the rest of my life. I want to learn. I said, I want to learn what makes film. I want to know how to tell stories. I want to know all of these different things so that I can understand it better, because I love this. I always loved movies when I was a kid. And it was through a course that I learned what I wanted to do. And I also learned that I have a huge passion for anthropology. I love learning about anthropology. I would have never known anything about anthropology had I not gone to school and taken one class in it. And I said, I love this. I nearly double majored in anthropology. I took so many courses, I nearly double majored in it. So you, of course, can learn about what your passions are in a school. Okay. And the thing is that I'm not trying to tell you guys that you can only learn it at a school. I'm just telling you that it's possible. In fact, it can be a lot easier to learn those things that were listed in that meme. It can actually be a lot easier to learn those in a school because you'll be with a lot of people who can help you. When you're alone, okay, and you can talk to neuroscientists about this, okay? When you're alone trying to learn something, it doesn't matter if it's through like a program or if it's watching YouTube videos or whatever it is, reading books. When you're alone, it's a lot harder to learn things. Okay, there were studies done, adults and children learning languages, and they were wanting to know, well, why is it that children learn languages so much easier and faster than adults? Well, part of it's the brain. But the biggest part of it, and my wife is a neuroscientist, okay? So we talk about this stuff a lot. The thing is that when children are learning languages in school, they're learning it in a way that is structured. There's a structured way of learning how to speak the language, how to talk to people, and you discuss problems that you have with each other. There's other people. You have a bunch of other kids that are learning the same thing. And adults, when they would take them, instead of, trying to just learn Spanish on their own, by reading a book or something, they'd put them in a structured class. All of a sudden, they were able to learn the language a lot faster and more effectively. So it wasn't really the brain issues. It was that there was a structure set up. And that's something that people really don't understand, is that it doesn't matter what kind of a learning institution it is. A good learning institution, doesn't matter if it's online, doesn't matter if it's through like a YouTube channel or whatever. If it's really trying to be like a program to teach you something that's important, like how to start a business, there needs to be a ton of effort put in to make sure that the curriculum is put in together in a way that will actually help people to learn, retain, and be able to, more importantly, test their knowledge to make sure that they actually had learning take place. And that is the main problem that people have when they try to learn on their own. They don't know how to structure their own learning, and they don't know how to test their own knowledge. How do you know what you don't know? Okay? How do you know what you don't know? That's one of the major things that you need to think about. Okay. If you're trying to pick between, do I go to a school or do I just read books and watch YouTube videos? Okay. If you know how to structure your learning and you buckle down and do the manual labor of figuring that out, and you can do it effectively, then yeah, you can learn all kinds of stuff. Okay. If you know how to test your knowledge, then yeah, you could probably do it. But a lot of people they don't even know where to begin on those things. They don't know how to scaffold learning. They don't know what a course learning objective is, or how to create a set of course learning objectives and how to attain them. And the majority of YouTubers don't know either. A lot of them are trying to sell you something. For me, I'm not even sure what I'm selling. I'm just trying to get some money to pay for whatever this is that I do every week. So, this is all stuff to think about. Okay. And I want you to understand it. If you are thinking about going to film school, right? If your thing is, I want to go to film school, if you're going to film school to try to learn how to be an entrepreneur, you're doing the wrong thing. Okay. I think that's why this particular individual is saying things like this, is probably because they went to school to learn how to do a skill like do film production and didn't go to school on how to be an entrepreneur. If they'd gone to school on how to be an entrepreneur, would it really be fair for them to complain that they don't know how to shoot a movie? Right? If I go get a film degree, is it fair for me to say, yeah, I've got this film degree, but I mean, they never taught me anything about rocket science. I can't build a rocket. Someone might ask me, well, why didn't you major in rocket science? Why isn't that what you tried to do if that's what you wanted to learn? Did you take any classes in that? No. How is it the school's fault? How is it not your own fault? Right? So, I just think that I just wanted to talk about this because I really value learning. Okay. I work in the field. This is what I do every day. Okay. I even on my off time, I'm doing it. Okay. I'm not going to say I'm the best at it, but I value learning a lot more than I do making any profits on anything. And I want to make sure that people aren't misled or misdirected or, being told something through sheer ignorance about what school does and how valuable it is. I think school is incredibly valuable. I think everybody should have the opportunity to go, to any university or do any kind of learning program that they want, because it's that valuable to me. So it really bugs me when people do that. If you're seriously considering, like, should I go to university, or should I go take these courses or whatever, I would say if you can afford it, you should just do it, because you're going to probably have a much better time learning than if you try to do it on your own. Even people who complain about their education afterwards, they don't know how much they learned sometimes. They have no idea how much they learned while they were in school. Okay? That's usually the case. They'll complain about things and not even remember all the things that got them where they are now. Okay. Thanks, Emotion VFX, for your donation. Helps me out a lot. So I really do appreciate it. So that's what I have to say about the whole school and personal learning. Obviously, if I didn't think that YouTube was helpful or useful for any learning, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to go and crap on learning institutions when, they clearly are able to teach you these things. Another thing I want to talk about real quick. It was funny because this is usually the argument I hear from people who are like anti-university kind of people, right? And just think about this, okay? You'll be told, it's usually entrepreneurs that do it. They say they don't teach you, they don't teach you how to, be, they just teach you how to, like, be a worker, right? They just teach you how to be a worker so you can have like a job, right? But then, the problem is, at least we have this in the United States, where there's no guarantee that you're going to get any work. If you get, like, tell me, if you get a degree in English, where are the English jobs? What are they? Where are they? They're teaching you English to be English job. What's English job? And then they'll also say this same argument. Then, if you get a degree like that, you can't even find work. So are they teaching you to be a worker, or are they teaching you not to be a worker? Which argument are you going to pick? They'll usually do it in the same conversation. They'll make the same claims. You only go there to be to have a job, and then at the same time say you spent all that money and can't get a job. So really what they're actually saying is that the reason why you go to a school is to learn. That is what you do. Okay? The job happens sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. Doesn't matter if you're, learning from a program that somebody is selling you on YouTube, or if you're learning from a program that is at a learning institution that's been around for 300 years. You're going to learn stuff, and if you get a career out of it, that's good. But really, what matters is the learning taking place. Are you actually learning or not? Anyway, I'll do some Q&A. I mean, that kind of thing just really bugs me, because it's usually the logic that's wrong. Like, there's a lot of things to complain about as far as, like, how universities are set up. Like, if you want to complain about how much they cost, dude, I'm with you. Too expensive. In the United States, at least, way too expensive. But saying, like, learning doesn't take place at universities, no, that's not true at all. Check your email later. You got a steak incoming. Had to send you that Weber stuff. Got a steak? What? I'll just check it right now. Let me check this out. Yeah. Get some steak on the grill. Yeah, see, that's what I want to make right there, dude. Yeah, see, I'm not sure about like if it's a big steaks like that, maybe I'll do it on the grill, but the way I do steaks, I'll probably do the skewers you're doing, but the regular steaks, I do them in the pan. Harder to spoon butter over them when they're on the grill. It's like when the Apple Bendgate happened a few years ago. Bendgate, I'm not sure what Bendgate is, but I know they would have like one of the issues was it was like a bent wire or something that would make the monitor turn off. And there's Louis Rossmann actually talked about this. If you're not familiar with Rossmann Group and you want to hear about Mac products, go there. But there was like a bent pin in the back of the monitor, and it would cause like if there's an issue with it, it would cause the monitor to turn off. And then Apple was saying, "Oh well, you need to buy a new computer now." And all that Louis Rossmann did was he would open up the computer and bend the pin back in place, and it would work for. He was like, "Yeah, it would work for like a really long time, but you're going to have to replace this thing at some point." And if that's what you're talking about, yeah, that's a huge problem. And there were people saying like, "Oh, this doesn't happen. Like, there's nothing wrong with Mac. If they tell you to buy a new computer, it's like the real thing. Like, it really means that you can't, repair it." And it's like, no, that's not the case. It's just Apple wants to sell you another computer. Like, they want money from you. They don't want to do the repair because it's not a sale to them. Okay, like that's reality. And then what was it? I think there's a problem with the butterfly keyboards. There's an issue where they solder things like batteries, something like that, to the motherboards, and it causes a problem. There's like a few things that they would solder to the motherboards. We know this because Louis Rossmann literally opens Macs and repairs them and shows issues with Macs to you, right? Like, he'll show you that these are issues, and Mac fans will say, "Oh, they don't exist." Dude, they do exist. Like, there are problems. Like, I get it. If you like Mac products, that's totally fine. I don't care. Like, you can like Mac products all you want, but to deny that there are issues with their products is wrong. There are issues, just like there's issues with many products. I just don't like Mac specifically for a lot of other reasons. Mainly it's because they usually tell you, "We're not going to fix this issue. You're just going to have to buy a new computer." School was really good at motivating me. Was the deadlines, competition, structure that made it easier to learn stuff fast. Didn't accidentally go down side quest rabbit holes. School 9 out of 10. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing, is that with any learning institution, the thing is, like, I think that especially younger people, you got to think of normally who's going to a university. It's someone who's probably around like 18 years old, right? Like right when they're done with high school. Dude, when you're that age, you're not in the right mindset. Like, you don't know how to really take control of your future and what courses you should really invest your time in and which ones you don't. A lot of people, I remember when I was in school, we had it where there were people who weren't paying their own way. They didn't have to take out any loans. It was just somebody else paying for them, and they wouldn't even show up to class. Like, they didn't care if they passed or not. And in those cases, is that school's fault, or is that the individual's fault that they're not learning? Right. I remember I was in it was a math class. It was a topics in mathematics. It was like the easiest math class I could take because I was not interested in doing any more. Like, I had already gone through algebra 2. It was basically like trigonometry. They just don't call it that for some reason. I guess it was too scary to people, but it was trigonometry. I got through that and I was like, you know what, that's about as far as I need to go with math. So I took topics in math because it was supposed to be really easy. It was actually really cool. Like, I learned all kinds of stuff in that class that I never thought I would learn in my life. That the way that pineapples, the way their spines grow is in order with this Fibonacci sequence, that a lot of things in nature are mathematically attuned to the Fibonacci sequence. Dude, I didn't know that. And that has a lot to do with like the golden mean. And we learned a lot about the golden mean and the golden rectangle and how that's, how many ways that's used in art as well as in nature. I mean, I learned that in my topics in mathematics class. before I learned it in anything else. And in that class, it was so funny because we had so many students in there that were failing, and it was the easiest thing. Like, we would have 2 weeks per topic, 2 weeks per topic. And it would be like you basically learned everything you needed to know about the topic within the first day. And then you had a practice test that was due at the end of the week. And then the following Friday, you would take the test, which was open book and open note, and people still managed to fail. And the only difference between the practice test and the real test was that the numbers were different. And half the class was failing. And I was like, I don't know how you fail this. I mean, at that point, is it on the teacher or is it on the students? Because the students wouldn't do their work. Like, they wouldn't turn in, half the class was not turning in their practice test. And then they were not able to pass the test later. And they were complaining that the class was too hard when they weren't doing their work. Is it the institution's fault at that point, or is it the student's fault at that point? So anyway, I remember I had a talk with him. It was like we had a mandatory chat with the teacher after the class. Like, we had to do 2 of them every semester for that class. And I remember talking with him one time. I said, I was like, I just don't understand it, why there's so many people having problems. And he said, well, I found out that like 75% of the class are from like these business courses, and most of them are failing most of their classes. And I don't know what the problem is, but there's something wrong with the business administration courses. And I was like, yikes. So, if you're going to fight against learning things, then you're not going to learn. Doesn't matter where you go. And in school, like, you have to take control of your own learning. If you don't try to take courses that you're actually interested in, then of course you're not going to learn about it. If you wanted to be an entrepreneur, you shouldn't have probably taken film classes. You should have probably double majored, or at least minored in one of those things, either, major in film, minor in business, or the better option is major in business, minor in film, because a film degree doesn't take you really anywhere, but a business degree does. I think it was iPhone 6. A lot of people are complaining that their phones seem to bend, and there are those that deny it happens, and those who tell them not to put it in their pocket. Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, like I remember that. Yeah. So you're not supposed to put the phone in your pocket. Like, a thing designed to put into your pocket, you don't put into your pocket. Okay. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. See here. If you have any more questions, please let me know, because I will be heading out very soon. We are making salmon tonight. Did I ever tell you guys about the salmon recipe? I'll tell it to you since I don't have any questions. So here's how you make perfect salmon. Oven 350, preheated to 350. Okay. You want to take some nice salmon. Usually, farm raised is okay, but the fresh caught usually better. But the thing with salmon is often it's overfished, so up to you. Then you're gonna. I usually go about a hand. That's about how much salmon I do. Yeah, like for the width, Then you're gonna take like a casserole dish. Okay. You get foil. You put enough foil in where you can tent it. Okay. So you put the foil in. You put the foil in there. You take some olive oil. You brush olive oil on the bottom of the foil. You put the fish in. Okay. You want to make sure you pat down the fish to get juices off. Like, sometimes there's too much juice on there and it's kind of like gross. So pat off the juice. That's just my thing. You don't have to. Then you're going to take lemon juice, do like a tablespoon or 2, pour that all over it. Okay. Then you take salt. Sorry, my dog's barking. You take salt, pepper, lemon pepper, and basil. Okay. Salt, you get some salt on there, pepper. Okay. then lemon pepper, you put that on, and then basil. Then you take butter, okay? You cut pads, not too thick, okay? And then you put those down it. Usually I do about 3 pads of butter, boom, boom, boom. And then you take lemon slices and then you put that on top of the butter. So what that's going to do is the butter is going to go in there and get like some nice fats in there to give it some nice juicy flavor. And then the lemon, when it sits on top, it makes sure to really get the butter melted all properly and keep it down into the fish. Okay. If you don't put the lemon on top, it's not the same. Okay. Then you take the foil and you bring it up and you tent it and seal it. Okay. You put that in the oven for 35 minutes at 350. It'll come out. It will never be dry and it will taste amazing. Okay. When I go out to eat, I never get salmon because it's always dry and overcooked. Expressive Imagery, thanks so much for the donation, man. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the help with the IPP2 LET process. No problem at all. No problem at all. I'm glad that you could use it. I think you sent me an email with it. The little process that you have there with all the different looks and yeah, the way that you're doing it to kind of like test them all out to see what works for you is great. I was just working today with that process to create some different looks. Teal and orange look is one of them. And it was really easy to do. So I'm glad that works for you. So very happy, very happy. Any plans for celebrating 4th of July? Well, usually I go over to San Diego on the 4th, but I can't do that this year, unfortunately. So I'll miss that. But my neighbors are having a movie party. They're going to be watching Independence Day. I forgot to tell my wife about it, but I will now. And she loves Independence Day, so we might do that. But COVID is like why I'm probably going to say no, because with the COVID situation, it's really bad in the United States. So we're probably not going to be doing anything like that. But hopefully my barbecue gets here before the 4th. I don't think it will, which is sad because I was going to barbecue. It was supposed to be here yesterday, but it's not. So, but not really a whole lot of plans. No, because of COVID, I can't do what I usually do. The 4th of July is great in San Diego. You just go out to my friend's house and we have a big pool party and it's awesome. Expressive Imagery. Yes, I sent you an email. Such a game changer for me and probably others too. Yeah, I'm really glad that it could help you. It had a lot of hits for the last few days. So I'm really happy that it helps people out. Like usually I don't need to have that like monitor thing on set, but like the last time I went to shoot, they were a little upset that it didn't look right to them. And I usually just leave it on my data anyway. But yeah, I'm really glad that that works for you. News said that there are new lockdowns. Anyway, enjoy the film and foods. Yeah, I mean, I might do it, but I'm probably not. Like if we go, it's just going to be like wearing masks all the time. And I just don't, I don't know. With the lockdowns, it's really unfortunate. I mean, really the lockdowns would not be such a problem if we did a few other things, which I'm just not going to go into that because I don't want this to be a COVID-19 thing. It's just very frustrating. Especially where I am, a lot of people just do not want to wear masks for some reason, and I just don't understand it. I think I watched a similar salmon recipe, but instead of placing lemon on top, they grated a lemon peel using a cheese grate. Yeah, lemon zest, like that's zesting. So I do that for a lot of things. The thing is that lemon zest for me on the salmon is a little bit too strong. So the thing is that the way that I do it with the butter and the lemon, like I wouldn't put the lemon slices on top if the butter melted exactly the same way perfectly every time without the lemon slices. The lemon slices are really just there to help with the butter to kind of go the way I want it to go. Otherwise, it can turn into like a puddle just sitting on the top whereas the lemon with the juice helps it to run down it, which is what I want. And then it pools, and you get the great thing is that it makes a fish sauce in the bottom, and then you spoon that. You can spoon that over rice, or you do like what I do, which is I actually like take my nice, beautiful piece of salmon that looks wonderful, and I actually cut it into pieces, and then I drip the juice in between the crevices of the fish, and I eat it that way, and it's freaking delicious. And you can like I said, you can also spoon that fish juice over rice, and yeah, it's great like that. But yeah, if you could Cthulhu used to be Mr. Subjective. If you do the same thing with lemon, use a cheese grater, you basically zest it, right? That's how you can flavor cakes. Like if you have a cake that you make that's like a regular cake mix, if you add lemon zest to the cake mix, you'll get the lemon flavor in the cake, and that's really the better way to flavor it. You can do that with like orange zest or lemon zest, that kind of thing. But when you do it, if you're going to do the zesting, make sure that once you get to the white of the peel that you stop. Otherwise, it gets really bitter. You just want the yellow part of the peel. If you do more than that, it gets gross. Like I've done it before accidentally. If you want to do Brussels sprouts, okay, a good way to do Brussels sprouts, you take the Brussels sprouts, you cut the V, make sure that you cut the little stem pieces off, okay, split them in half. You cook that, like you basically fry that, and then you season it with salt, pepper, chopped garlic. And when you chop the garlic, you press it down to get the oils out, so it's nice and oily. You remove from heat once the Brussels sprouts are fork tender. You add the garlic, and you add lemon zest, just like what you're talking about. You add the lemon zest to that. Dude, that's really good. Good Brussels sprouts. Easy to do too. Yeah, you know what? I've been thinking about it. It's just to do the cooking videos would be a lot of work to do it the right way. For me, it would just be a lot. It would be a lot more work. I want to do that. It's just maybe if I didn't have a regular day job, I would do it, but I do. Yeah, dude, the pizza was so good. Oh my God. Like I'm telling you, if you do the biggest change, if first pepperoni under the cheese, okay, and make your own pizza. Like if you haven't made your own pizza, you don't have to make the dough. Like the dough is the hardest part, but doing the actual pizza itself, like you can do the toppings the way you want, and it'll be like better, okay. But putting the pepperonis under the cheese, okay, and then getting Gruyere cheese instead of mozzarella, or mixing it with the mozzarella, will get you a really, really good flavor. And that helps with like, because one of the issues, like if you go to Costco and you get the pizza there, it always has like oil on the pepperonis on the top, and I hate that. I like always get a napkin and I'll like blot it because it's disgusting, like all that oil on the top. But if you put the pepperoni underneath the cheese, you won't really have that problem. But yeah, I made like one of the few pizzas I eat is jalapeno and pepperoni. And the other one you'll probably hate, but anchovy pizza. Love anchovy pizza. Yeah, so that's it for today. There will not be, next Wednesday is my birthday. So there will not be a live stream. I meant to mention that at the head of the live stream. There will not be a live stream next Wednesday because that's my birthday. So I will have a week off from doing this. So I don't know what we're doing for my birthday, but I will not be live streaming. Okay. So have a good rest of your week. I'm glad that so many of you found use in the last few videos that I did create, especially the Red IPP2 one. So I will catch you guys later. And I have my email still open. So if you have issues or you need help with anything, please let me know and I can help you out. Okay. All right. Bye, guys.